Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Happiness is the core of human life. If you balance these four quadrants, there are greater chances that you'll achieve happiness in your life.
That was Manoj Deorukhkar, a CIO who used to hate IT. He shares his aha moment when he understood why many people hate IT and what can be done to make them love IT. Among other experiential tips he shares are about building and nurturing personal intranets within an organization, as well as planning. Tips to balance 4 key quadrants of your life for happiness. Manoj also shares his love for nature, and you can actually hear the birds chirping in the background as we recorded this conversation from our homes. Listen on.
Welcome to the Software People Stories, Manoj.
Thank you very much and happy to be here.
I'm also looking forward to this conversation after I heard about you from Milind. And usually we start with the guest introducing oneself in terms of how you got into IT and what has been your career trajectory.
Oh, that's a very interesting story that I always narrate. And it's a good way to start. I think I came to IT by accident. I would like to state that. But before we get into that, let me just quickly introduce myself. And I am kind of aware of the fact that I'll be talking to an audience which itself carries a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience, and I would say capability in the IT field. And I would kind of start by saying my name is Manoj Deorukhkar. Currently, on the professional front, I'm working as a CIO for a group called Sterling & Wilson. It's a 90-year-old group, again owned by Shapoorji Pallonji Group, which is quite in news nowadays, which itself is about 153 years old. And that makes it a very, very interesting role, both in terms of carrying the legacy as well as pushing the reforms, the digital reforms that we want to do. And it's a very enjoyable job. I mean, put it like this. I live in Bombay and with a family, with a wife and 2 kids. And as you can see in my background, I love nature. So there are a lot of trees around my house.
Yeah,
and that's something that I really enjoy, which is there.
In Mumbai, that too.
It's that in Mumbai, that's right. And so I think this is a bit about me. What I would really want to go back to as to how I got into IT. So I did my engineering in metallurgical engineering from IIT Bombay. I finished in 85. And I think except for me and one more person, everybody went abroad. But that was not on my cards. I decided that I'm not going to go for further studies to US, which was the most popular destination those days. And I actually stayed back. I joined Tata's. That was my first job. Being a metallurgist, steel was something that came very, very naturally. And I joined as a GT. And those were like fantastic years where you start learning the real, real field manufacturing, working with the great, kind of people from the shop floor who would deal with molten steel and all sorts of heavy work, and you really admire them, how they do that. I worked for almost a decade. And let me tell you, there was nothing related to IT in that. I did everything which is non-IT. Manufacturing, I did application engineering, I did R&D, I did sales and marketing. I worked also as an executive assistant and a managing director, which was a great exposure, but nothing to do with IT, let me tell you. And in fact, I was one of those guys who were quite anti-IT because we thought IT was quite intrusive in terms of rolling out the reports, which always showed us in a bad, bad light. So it is only just, kind of a law of prudence that I landed in IT there. So after working for a decade, I thought I may go for something which is different. And process consulting came as something which was top of my mind. And I said, let me just get into the process consulting for people because having worked through so many functions, maybe I'm in a better way to do that. Of course, during this time, I also did my MBA from Bajaj Institute, which was the premier institute from Mumbai University those days. So I had also an MBA degree and work experience in various functions. So I said, let me go for process consulting. But it was very hard to get into process consulting unless you've done it straight from the campus those days. But I got a break with Mahindra, and they had set up a company called Mahindra Consulting, which was earlier called as Mahindra Consulting. And the CEO and a couple of senior leadership, they liked my profile and they said, you come as a functional consultant. So as long as the word consultant was there, I was happy. I said, let me go. And so before I realized, I got certified on SAP and I became a SAP consultant. And that's where I think my entire journey started from IT, which is there. And as it happened in most of the the IT sectors, from being a consultant, I became a senior consultant, I became a project manager, I became a capability lead, and so on and so forth, which is there. It was a fantastic exposure, I must say. Very, very good company to work for. This is now is called as Bristlecone. Absolutely a great company to work for. I enjoyed every day that I worked. And it also enriched in terms of knowing the IT, knowing processes, knowing how the organizations work. And from there, I think it was then logical that I moved on because of my personal reasons to MNCs, worked briefly for Capgemini. I worked for about 7 years in Accenture. And then it was all about consulting. So it was a completely different field altogether. I thought that I must also learn about the other side of the table. So how do the organizations really perceive IT? And this is something that I had always seen as a part of consulting team. I always seen that the way that we see IT and the way the client sees IT, there's a big gap, huge gap in terms of KPIs, expectations, etc., which is there. So it is something that I thought was very interesting. So in 2013, I was hired by Shapoorji Pallonji Group as a part of their corporate IT to deliver SAP transformation project. And this was really a large project, a very complex project, full of challenges. That's what I was told. And I said, okay, looks like a good challenge. And it was a job in Bombay. I mean, what more do you really ask for a Bombay?
Yeah.
Otherwise, most of the jobs were outside Mumbai, and to kind of disturb the family and move out was the last thing I really wanted to do. Of course, having done it in Capgemini and Accenture of constant traveling, I thought it's a good challenge and a good place. And this is where I started. So delivered that particular SAP transformation project. It got a very prestigious SAP Ace Award of 2014. And then I stayed on to roll on, more IT initiatives. And 2.5 years back in 2018, I moved to Sterling Wilson as a CIO, because then I thought that from purely a digital, initiatives, I would probably learn something more about IT security and the latest trend in digitalization, as well as infrastructure. Also, it was a kind of a full basket, which I thought would be good for me. And this is where I am today. So I think looking back, every 2.5 years, I had a change. Not change of organization, but change of role. And this is, call it a 2 years each, or call it a share by providence. I always had kind of changed my portfolio. And Sterling Wilson, I think it changed the way it is really progressed and the way it has developed. I would say it didn't have to actually wait for 2.5 years, changing quite rapidly. And today I think my major focus is more in terms of working with the business, in terms of strategizing, and also working on the key change management initiatives which are taking place across, in the organization. Yeah. So I think this is short about me.
Yeah, wonderful. In fact, I was trying to keep track of all the different roles and responsibilities that you have played. But a couple of things that kind of triggered my curiosity was that you started saying that when you were in the steel industry, you did not like IT. From there, how has it been to be a consultant and help organizations adopt IT?
Yeah. So the reason that I probably did not think very good about IT was the way it was structured those days. It was called an ADP department. And this was like sanctorum of somewhere in a corner of the office, where people worked in a chilling, air-conditioned offices and the data centers. And one of the things that I always felt is that we didn't really relate to each other. Anybody from EDP used to talk COBOL, they used to talk, things like mainframe and kind of those kind of things, which is there, which frankly I didn't really realize it. When I was trying to say that I have this problem, obviously there used to be someone who's like a third party who would come and try to understand, and they were called as business analyst. A business analyst would be the interpreter between the two, etc. So I think that connection never happened, and so I was completely wrong in having those kind of impressions. But it took some time for me to realize that, alas, had I known this, probably I would have leveraged IT far better. So this was a thought that I had when I moved into IT. What it really, and this is very interesting because when I got into IT, I was quite, I think, older than most of the other colleagues who had come straight from the college. They'd done their BE from information technology, and then they had joined, and they were far ahead of me in terms of understanding IT systems, in terms of picking up new things which are there. And believe me that even working on keyboards was a challenge for me because I never worked with that furiously, with that speed, right? With everybody else was doing it, I actually developed quite a lot of complex in first few months, saying that, oh, I think I have done a mistake. This is where it started off. And many times at the end of the day, my thought would be, should I go back to the steel business? Should I go back to Tata Steel and say that, please take me back? I'm not enjoying this. Okay. So I sat down and I actually talked to the CEO of the company, fantastic person, Dr. Dhananjay Mahajan, DG Mahajan, great guy, and very upfront and absolutely, a kind of person you can talk very openly. And I said, look, this is what I think, and I really want to go back. And he said that you are not understanding what is ahead of you, and you're not being hired because we thought you'll work on a keyboard or you would be able to code and you will be able to get into a server and find out something. That's absolutely not. We have plenty of those kind of skills which are available in the company. Those are of course very coveted and very important skills for us. But you have been hired because you must understand the client and you must understand the business. This is where we don't have too many people. Okay, and people who have, of course, they came from certain industry and they seem to be kind of having a very good experience on that kind of manufacturing industry, but we wanted something different flavor which is there. So this is what I'm expecting from you. And then the rest of the history, I got certified. I got my first project, which is so important. And this is the first time I think, so I was in 30s, I was as happy and thrilled to get the first project as any 22-year-old, software engineer will be thrilled to the and go there. And then I discovered, I think the business knowledge that I had actually helped me to communicate and connect to the client much better. So I actually was kind of a person who really got into my job knowing that I know the business part of it, I don't know the IT part of it. Honestly, because just being a certified SAP consultant doesn't give you a great amount of exposure which is there. So during the day, have these discussions, kind of ask a lot of questions. Ask a lot of questions, like those days used to be exercise duty. So, okay, how do you really do this particular register, that register? I mean, I could really talk those things which are there. And they found it very interesting that someone who's supposed to be an IT person can actually talk about all these things which are there. And of course, I was not the only one. There are also, I think, people better than me doing functional consulting. They also could talk about it, but important thing that I could talk. And that was, I think, very important. Then work in the evening to go through this copious SAP notes, SAP screens, do all these R&D, call up your senior consultant and ask them, how do you really do this? How do you achieve this? Is it possible or not possible? Actually do that and show it in the morning to the client, saying that, okay, client is saying that, look, this is what we discussed today, and this is what, do you think this will work? And they will say, yes, it will work, fantastic. Or they will say, no, it needs some changes. No problem. During the day, talk to the client, in the evening, sit and do that. Okay, so it was almost like 16, 18 hours grill on the first project, but that was all worth it. And this was like those first 3-4 months, I learned as much. Probably I would have learned, in 10 years of this as far as it comes to IT. And it was, as I said, it was a fantastic company, fantastic people. They were kind of very open and supportive. So I got my feet in IT. And then I think it was much easy. I could just get into that. And I think my team, my manager and the company was also good enough to notice that I have kind of become very comfortable now. And And then my portfolio started growing. So more and more responsibilities started coming, and before I realized I was a project manager. So that also was kind of and this is a very interesting story. This is a company called Vikram Ispat, which is based in a very nice, very picturesque location near Alibag. And it seems that the president of that company insisted that I want someone who understands steel as a project manager. And of course, my name cropped up right on the top of the list, metallurgist and steel, 10 years in steel. And so I had no project management background. I had no PMP. Okay? But my boss said, don't worry. Just it is important that we back this contract and we, kind of put a credible project manager in front of the president. And by the way, that gentleman doesn't know anything about IT. So he's going to talk business. And this is what you should be doing. And literally in 5 minutes, we found out so many common, personalities. He was also from IIT Bombay. I am an alumni of IIT Bombay. And then, it was a done deal in 10 minutes. Okay. And this is where you start realizing that there's much more than just an IT in the world, to really open opportunities for you and get into that. And this is, I think, is one, the people-to-people contacts and people-to-people conversation perhaps is the most important thing, whether it is in IT or any other function which is there. That was, I think, the kind of a good learning insight that really I got it. And then, of course, rest is all hard work and picking up and having your network, make sure that you are learning every day. All of that is, even today, every day there's a new learning, formal, informal, whatever it is there. I think that this is what I would sum up has been the story of the life. And whether you have 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, at the end of it, if you really put the entire earnings of your professional career, I think it will just come to a handful of learnings that you carry all the time in your life. And I think these are the few learnings which have been always with me, and it keeps adding and refining, which is there. So I think that's about how I got into IT, hating the IT to loving the IT, and how, very importantly, how to make others love IT, how to make others understand the power of IT. I think this is what is the purpose of my life. It's not about just an IT delivery. It is about how to make people start loving and adopting IT. Because the moment you make your internal customer, because I'm on the client organization side now, if your internal customers and stakeholders start owning IT initiatives, I think 50% of your battle is won. Rest 50% is all about getting it through.
Very true and very interesting. And I realized that it is a small world. When you talked about networking, I also had the opportunity to work with DG Mahajan. We used to call him Doc Mahajan.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a small world.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's also interesting that you talk about people, connections, networks, and how it kind of helped you in a business situation as well. We also talk about software development being a team sport. So how do you handle the networking? I mean, more like an intranet, so to say, because our external networks, business networks, if it is the extranet where the connections are there, or like the internet, but within your own teams. Now, as a CIO, not only the teams that are directly under you, the technology teams, but also with the businesses that you work with. How do you approach those networks, and are there any stories that you would like to share? What worked and sometimes what didn't work also?
Absolutely. So I will, of course, I won't take names now because it's important for us to understand the context rather than specifics which are there.
Yeah, sure.
Typically, I've seen there are 3 kinds of situations you encounter. One is that you have an opportunity of building the team right from scratch. So every person that you have actually hired and you have developed and you kind of around that, the best situation one can dream for. Second is that the team has kind of come. Already was there and you happen to be the manager or the head of that particular team, and then you got to really align this team to come to your way of thinking and aligning it to the objective, not only my thinking, objective. And third is where you have a very heterogeneous team which has been put together for the purpose of a project, and which is the most often situation that really you really come in and it is there. The first situation is very rare, and if you're lucky, I have been lucky, I think multiple times, to be able to build a team. And that made it so easy, because when you can actually align them right from day one, and you can choose the right people, you can choose the right kind of skills, etc. But that doesn't really happen very often. You really get to inherit a team, or you get a team which is there, which is put together either through nomination or through availability, which is, I think, the first and foremost thing is to set the common set of objectives, and that only can really set the team to think and see one direction which is there. It is the easiest when you have a project, because when project have a objective, deadlines, the roles are pretty easily defined, very easy to do it. All you have to do is that you really have to sit down, you have to talk to people, you have to understand each of your members really at a one-to-one level. Make your own assessment, which doesn't mean it is almost that you're not doing a psychometric test. But for the purpose of the project, you really sit down and assess. Seems to be a diligent person, very meticulous person, maybe very slow in doing the things. Someone who is very fast, extremely passionate, and can move, but can be reckless at times. Okay. Now each of that person has a role to play in your project in different phases which are there. So when it comes to ideation, or it's a 2B or a discovery, or call it a business blueprint, whatever it is there, you really need thinkers. You can't rush those things. You need thinkers, people who can go very deep down and make sure there is no risk. Everything is identified. You require a set of people who can actually do that. And of course, everybody has to work, but there's some people who really carry that load of business blueprint. Then comes the build part of it, and delivery part of it, testing part of it. Sometimes you require people who are those guys who can rush the things, accelerate the things. They can actually go and demolish the inertia. They can handle every objection and say, still move ahead. That's the utility of those people which are there. You need to. There are some people who can integrate, can network with the internet basically, and influence the things and make it happen. Okay, so you really have to look at the positive value that people are going to bring to the table, and don't focus on negatives. Everybody has them. I mean, I have a lot of them. Okay, I have a lot of them, and of course, sometimes you realize, you don't realize. But it is very important that you don't focus on the negative part of anybody's behavior, because that just defocuses you and then builds that despair, saying, I have got a bad team. These guys can't think, that guy can't move. That doesn't get you anywhere. So focus on positive. There's no doubt about it. And a project is not a time where you could actually influence and correct those behaviors. So don't even try getting into that. Accept people as they are and align it. And I think the role model for me in this particular case, I don't want to sound religious, is Prabhu Sri Ram. He built and conquered Sri Lanka with monkeys, right? Now, obviously, you can't say that, okay, monkeys are everything. He just looked at what is good with them, and one of the epic battles which are there, right? Role model for us. And I'm sure there's role models everywhere. The question is different when you have a team, which is not a project team, but your permanent team, which is working with. I think there you got to invest a lot, invest into people quite a lot. And this is where you would actually do a strength versus areas of development analysis, which is there. And you got to handle it very, very carefully, because there are some people who are so sensitive that you really talk about areas of development, they will just get into the shell. And 2 years later, you will say, you said something on that particular day, I have not been able to get out of my hand. That just creates barriers between your team member and you. So again, you got to sit down, you really have to spend time to understand what are they good at, what are they not so good at, what role you have in mind, and what are those risks that the person carries because of certain weaknesses which are there. Work on that. You may or may not be able to actually make that person overcome the weakness, but at least there's an agreement, there's an acceptance, and there's a risk mitigation. Weaknesses are like risks, strengths are like strengths. Okay, they are like positives which are there. So you always in your team, you got to either mitigate a risk or you have to cover the risk. And this is how you really build your team and create a roadmap for them, invest in their learning, invest in their career, which is there. If you can make your team really accept that they have to learn every day, which is far more than what they're learning in a normal course of this, I think that's a great achievement. And the rest of the journey will go very, very smooth. Some of them will stay with you, some of them may not stay with you, but you got to invest in them. You cannot say that I will invest only in those guys who seem to be loyal, seem to be, long-term. No, people can be changed through investments, and you must do the investment which is there. Okay, so I think these are the three models into which typically I would even in my team there are some teams which have been small technology groups which have been absolutely ground up. So my strategy there will be different than the large team that I have inherited when I moved in 18. Strategy is completely different. Every day for every project we have a team, core team members, steering committee members, project, the process owners, they are a part of your team. So you really have to look at team in a very universal sense and not necessarily in terms of functional sense, which is there.
That's great advice, Manoj. I think investing in people And that also, I guess, contributes in building strong networks.
Yes.
And then, yeah, the connections,
Absolutely.
they always come back to you, and then you can also rely on them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think you also talked about internet, which is there. People, and I'll just take probably a minute to more talk about it. Is that
Sure.
beyond a team that works with you, you got to proactively build those equity in others who may not have any work with you. So I think go out and reach out to as many people in the organization as possible, because many times you land up for the first time when there's a bad news, there's a bad situation. It's not. I would not recommend that is the right way to start a relationship. So at least reach out to people, try to understand, try to take some interest in them. 5 minutes, 10 minutes conversation is fine, because that person will always carry a positive impression about you. And when there's a bad news, there's a better communication. Of course, there are also stories when you started with a bad situation, bad event, and yet created a very, very strong bond later on. There are war stories about it, but I would not recommend that, because when many times it doesn't work also. So proactive, go and build. You have work, you don't have work, doesn't matter. Maybe there's some digitization opportunity that will come with area where person has never seen face of IT. I don't want even IT. And I'm a good example of that, because as I said, in 10 years, I never seen this face of IT. So you can convert some of these people into a very strong supporters and adopters.
Yeah, one curiosity question here is that one of the common challenges that I hear from many people in IT, and including myself, is related to also the other side of the burnout thing, that we don't have time. There is so much of work. So how do you make time for networking, quality connections?
I think it's a very, very difficult question, but I'll try to answer it. I'll answer it in a roundabout way or an indirect way, which is there. What really causes too much of work for anybody? Okay, and the common causes out of what I've analyzed so far in the situation is that number one is the unrealistic commitments. Okay, second is that when you are reactive and not proactive, you're going to be dragged into a situation which is out of your control. Lack of planning. Unfortunately, many of the IT initiatives do not see a good amount of sound planning which is required. And this is where I think my first interaction with Milind was when he encouraged me to do PMP, in this. And I realized planning is such a important thing for managing your own life, whether it is IT or it is your own life, doesn't matter. But planning is so proactiveness, planning, okay. And the third very important thing is that when unrealistic commitments, and fourth very important thing is kind of a risk, not having a proper scenario sketching, risk analysis, effective mitigation strategy, and last but not least is that you have to stand up to certain pressures which come to you. If someone comes and said, I want something tomorrow, I don't care how you do it, you really have to stand out and say that, sorry, I mean, I don't mind doing it, but you have to, kind of, if it is really required, you have to do it. But then there's a part that you have to do it, and there's a part that the client also has to do it. And if you don't have enough, courage to stand up and say that this is a part of your job where you have to do it and understand it, dependability. I think there are 4 or 5 areas which I've seen people calming down, ignoring it, and getting into that burnout situation which is there. Okay? So I would say if you are doing some new initiatives which are like new projects, or you're having a business as usual application support and infrastructure support activities which are there, you got to have a sound plan in place. You must have a plan. You must have good scenario sketching and risk mitigation that will come out of it. And you got to be very proactive and very communicative. But very importantly, you must have courage. Not that all of that is going to eliminate the entire pressure out of the system, because our country, unfortunately, and I said that because of the fact that I kind of really worked with many countries in my tenure. And one of the striking difference I saw in India is complete lack of planning. That's whether the bridge or it is a railway line or it is an IT project, usually gets delayed. Second thing is that we actually don't acknowledge the fact. We want to keep the bad news right up to the last moment which is there. And third, very importantly, we don't care for each other's time. Unfortunately, we don't care for each other's time. Something that could have been communicated to you 1 week back comes to you at 11th hour. I think it is something that you at least should say that you should, please next time do it better. I think that has a lasting, impact. So I think unless we respect our own people, We respect their time. We are always going to be planning our activities which will be over 150% capacity, and then you land up in trouble, which is there. You should actually do it for 80% of the capacity and leave 20% for contingency. And that would mean that you have to take some hard decisions, outsource, kind of delay certain projects which are not absolutely critical. That requires a lot of courage, a lot of data crunching to provide the facts and put a very, very logical argument. I think people listen to you. But this is what I think, is the bane of everything which is there. I work for the companies where 5 o'clock, you are completely disconnected and Saturday, Sunday, no one calls up. And I also work for the companies where there's no Sunday, there's no Saturday, there's nothing called 11 o'clock, there's nothing called the calls which will come at 2 o'clock in the morning, correct? I think it's culture, nothing more than that. The first company was far more successful economically and from a market standpoint than the second company, without naming them. So it is not that you really have to work chalk field to be successful. Absolutely not. In fact, it will be otherwise. The creativity of people will just go down. They will work they'll work actually with, okay, I'll just do that. The defensive mechanism sets in place. The blame game starts off and, kind of you got to cover yourself. Those are the kind of things. There are a huge amount of negative connotations of working in that particular fashion. So we got to really put our foot down and manage the pressure on your terms. This is very, very important.
Yeah, all sounds very, very practical, but I'm sure it'll take a lifetime to master this. And there are many common thoughts that I have as well. I guess if we get into that, it'll probably take a long time. But in the interest of time for this podcast, I thought I'll take your emphasis on planning as a segue to a favorite question that I would like to learn from all the guests, which is for two categories of people. One who's considering a career in IT, say fresh out of college, whatever, and the other mid-career in IT. Both of them have questions in terms of, can I plan? What can I plan? What should I do? What should I not do, etc. Do you have any advice for them?
I have a very surprising advice. And this is because for each of us, 5 years back, we would have not imagined where we are today. We would have some notion about it, but in specifics, we would have not known. We wouldn't have known, pandemic. We wouldn't have known the explosion that happened in the digital space of IoTs. Nobody had heard about blockchain at that particular point of time. So I'm saying, when you plan, don't plan very specifically, because then you are actually closing your entire vision down to some specifics. I mean, there are people obviously who said that, I want to be something in SAP for that matter, or I want to be a great guy in Microsoft. You don't know how SAP is planning, or you don't know how Microsoft is. So don't plan too tightly, too specifically. You should have your first and foremost. It doesn't start with your IT as a focal point. And this is a very frank advice I want to give it. Think about what kind of a life you want to have. Plan your life first. What is the kind of life you want to live? Do you want to really chase money? You want to chase professional capability? What kind of a work and life, balance that you want to have it? You must have a dream about that. Start with that. Okay? Because if you're not clear about it, you'll be just chasing some train without knowing where you're going. So fix your destination first. Okay. Second very important thing is, I think, try to understand what is it that you like and what is it that you don't like. If you're very clear about it, your choices will become very, 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 apparent to you as you go ahead, and you will be very clear about what to take, what not to take. Okay? It is slightly on a very, kind of a, I would say 30,000 feet, which is there, but according to me, this is very important that you must know what you want to do, and very importantly, what you like and what you can't put away. Very simple. Okay, there are two things which are important. Now, having said that, it is a fact of the life is that the career choices in IT have changed every 2-3 years. Someone who had actually built a life on mainframe and Unix, okay, Y2K, everything changed, correct? Everything changed. There are unforeseen opportunities which have come up, and anybody who was an early adopter of those actually went to the moon, while everybody else was. So keep your options completely open. Don't make a plan which is too tied to a technology or tied to anything which is there. That's a vehicle. Every technology and every skill is a vehicle. Understand that it's not a life. So you got to choose your vehicle depending upon what is moving in a right direction where you want to go and at the pace that you want to go. That's the most important thing. But having said that, 3 things which are very important. Number 1 is that every technology exists in the world not because it's a great technology, but because it's a utility of that technology for fulfilling certain societal or human researches. Never lose the focus of that. So when you talk about the technology, please also ask what that technology does, and if you can master what that technology can do, I think you're ahead of the pack. Coming back to saying that There has to be a client for everything that you want to do. And what is that? What difference that your technology makes to a client is something that you all the time start learning. And there are different users which will be there. Second very important thing is that people have been very important even in the Unix days and mainframe days and COBOL days. They were important in that explosion of ERP. They're equally important even today in that entire digitization that is happening. At the end of the day, even in cyber security, you can do everything, but you can never cover the vulnerability of an individual who's tempted to download something or click on a URL which is there or accept some freebie which is coming. People are going to be very important, and you must develop the skills. Call it people management, people interaction, or emotional quotient. EQ is the latest thing which really has taken. They are going to be important, and you must develop your skills to be with people, which is there. Okay? Any of the high profile technology consultant or technology great guru, you'll find are very good on EQ part of it. They understand people very well. They can predict how people can and cannot behave in a particular manner. And third very important thing is that please do not lose balance. There are 4 quadrants of your life. One is yourself, with your own self, understanding yourself, hobbies. Second is your family, immediate family, extended family, whatever it is there. Third is your profession. And fourth is your society, which is around you. Okay. Now, in a young age, it is always yourself and your profession. Once you get married and have a family, it is yourself, profession, and the family. Okay. Now, as you grow, your yourself investment goes down, your hobbies goes down. You spend your time more in your family and your profession. That's a typical Indian scenario I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Americans. They're different. They behave in a different way. And when as you start kind of growing, and I'm sure Siva will, your society obligations and society paying back to society becomes very, very important. Whether it is Narayan Murthy or anybody you take it, or it is Azim Premji, correct? And these people are known not because they are just technologists, but there's a lot they have done in terms of paying it back to society, which is, of course, with age, the relative importances of these will vary, weightages will vary. But you should never lose the sight on all these 4 quadrants and make your life balance. Technology will take you. Don't worry about it. Technology will take you. Someone who has really worked hard and tried to do it will be maybe just a few percentages ahead of someone else who has balanced it out. So balance your life out and make the right investments in yourself, in your family, in your hobbies, of course, your professional qualifications, and also give it back to society. I think happiness is going to be very, very important in the time to come. It is not just a success, it is a happiness. It is going to rule every day which is there. Look at Gen Y. They are driven by happiness, by the experience and everything which is there. And it's nothing wrong with it. Happiness is the core of human life. If you balance these 4 quadrants, there are greater chances that you'll achieve happiness in your life. I think I can't go into specifics and tell you what should a Microsoft or AWS guy do. I leave it to you. Whatever you like, you go ahead and do that. But never lose the focus on these balances. These are very, very critical for the human life.
Yeah, wonderful. In fact, I recently came across this book. It has been around for a while, called Total Leadership System, which is by a Harvard professor, which talks about exactly these 4 dimensions and how one can do that, etc. So,
excellent.
Yeah, on that great note, I would like to thank you for the time that you've taken, Manoj, and share all these practical tips, I would say, because I could relate to a lot of things that you mentioned, having gone through some of them myself. And I'm sure that our listeners would definitely find benefit in all this. Thank you, Manoj.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. And thank you for giving this opportunity for connecting to such a diverse and I would say accomplished audience. And I hope that you will find at least a few points valuable to yourself. Thank you very much.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Malavika for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.